As we all know, the combat system of Persona takes place on a grid of squares, and each attack has a certain range of squares it can affect in relation to where the character is placed. Oh, they got rid of that? What I meant was that Persona's combat has always revolved around every character being able to change personas, and each character has unique ways of befriending enemies for Arcana cards. Oh, that's not how you remember it? Okay, so Persona pivoted to a knockdown system where when you hit an enemy with its weakness, it falls over and the character who did that has the chance to act again. If they knock down a unique enemy that wasn't down before, the process repeats. When they're all down, the team members not affected by certain ailments can perform an all-out attack, a move that does massive damage with no downside. Then in P5 they added baton passing so you could pass on that extra turn to a different ally, Royal added show times, then P3 Reload added Aigis. Everybody who knows of Persona knows what the combat should look like from any game that released in the past 18 years. It's cool, satisfying, and can be optimized to hell and back. But Persona 3, as the first modern title, was the first game to dramatically alter how combat works, and being the first attempt at it, some choices were made that were swiftly removed and never acknowledged again. In fact, these changes came so quickly that the combat of Portable is different from the original 3 and Fez, being nearly identical to the system used in Persona 4. This game's also tough. It was my first Mega 10 game, and playing on normal, I got stuck a lot, and it took work and thought to make it past my problems. And yeah, you can steamroll the game, whatever man. Did you know that Silksong is easy if you just don't get hit? Anyway, Persona 3 tunes down the number of active party members from 5 to 4. Instead of all characters being able to swap personas on command and each character having affinities for different arcana, only the protagonist can change personas. Characters can still awaken to stronger evolved personas though, and this time they're wholly unskippable, which is actually unique to the franchise. Past titles require you to have certain items and or to have selected certain dialogue choices, while future games place these awakenings at the end of optional social links. To compensate for your party members having a static persona, they all get one that grows stronger alongside you all game long, gaining skills that slowly increase in potency and typically have a single weakness and resistance to keep allies flexible but unique. Unlike, say, Maya's persona Artemis, who reflects all magic and is weak to all forms of physical damage, but can be unequipped to better suit your situation. Also, not every character's weakness is the opposite of their own element, which I find to be very refreshing. This of all things I'm surprised hasn't made a comeback. It's nice when what a character is strong against isn't also strong against them. In terms of damage types, P3 has the standard 4 magical elements of fire, ice, electricity, and wind, light and dark insta-kill, almighty, and unique to it, 3 types of physical damage: slash, pierce, and strike, adding up to 10 damage types. That's more than P4, which consolidated physical skills down to a single type, leaving 8, and 1 less than P5, which opted to add 2 magic types and separate gun skills from other physical skills, clocking in at 11. Amazingly, those all pale in comparison to Persona 2, which features 17 damage types. But that's for another day. What I want to highlight here is that P3 has 3 types of physical damage. In Persona 5, every character has a physical weapon and a gun, meaning they can all access both physical elements. But for the most part, Persona 3 decides to further diversify each character's kit by making each physical weapon only deal a specific type of damage. One-handed swords, two-handed swords, and knives are slashing, boxing gloves and heavy weapons like axes and hammers are strike, and bows, bullets, and spears are piercing. That means that Yukari has her healing and wind magic, and is also capable of using piercing, specifically with her bow. Junpei and Aigis gain access to more elements over time since they focus on physical skills. Junpei's sword deals slashing damage, and his first few physical skills are also slashing, but around level 20 he gets a pierce skill and a strike skill, allowing him to perfectly cover any physical weakness, and arguably, more importantly, be a very consistent source of damage, since it's rare for an enemy to resist or be immune to all forms of physical damage outside of counter skills. Aigis is similar, but with more of a focus on AoE physical attacks and support, allowing her to clean random encounters and keep the team buffed up, increasing deadliness and survivability. The varied and static attributes of weapons help define the kit of each character. Going back to Junpei and Yukari, Junpei uses two-handed swords. They're big and strong and deal slashing damage. To emphasize the risk and reward of such a weapon, Junpei can miss sometimes, and that outcome has a chance to knock Junpei onto his ass, downing himself. This can lead to bad situations if you needed him to kill something and now he's out 2 turns, but it's the cost of the high damage he offers. The game does follow a form of logic though, as when Yukari misses with her bow, she does not and cannot down herself, so she'll never be downed if she misses, which she will. The price of the safety of her bow is that her damage and accuracy aren't good. It's not the worst deal ever considering how rare it is for Yukari to use it, but you'll definitely want it in the early game when running into Pierce weak enemies. Other weapons have different traits, like Akihiko's boxing glove being extremely accurate but low on power, and heavy weapons are an even more extreme version of Junpei's two-handed sword. Unsurprisingly, enemies don't have perfect accuracy either. But what's cool is that the enemies that take wilder swings have higher miss chances and can potentially down themselves, losing 2 turns unless they're hit out of their down state, just like your own party. I didn't check if all weapons can do this, but critical hits are characterized as 3 hits leading into a knockdown, and regular attacks are 1 hit. Also a chance that a regular attack can be 2 hits, dealing more damage than a regular attack, but isn't technically a crit. I don't know why this feature was added or removed, but it certainly is exciting to get more value than what you expected from an attack. And of course, that's not all there is to regular attacks. Persona 3 was the first title to emphasize the power of a single wildcard Persona user. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it used to be that anybody could equip a different Persona, which went as far as meaning that your whole party would follow you into the Velvet Room and hang out while you trade Arcana cards for new Personas. Starting with 3 onward, Atlus decided that only the MC would have that trait, and other party members would be stuck with the personas they awakened to until it evolved. But just like Makoto can swap out his persona with ease, he can change his weapon type. No training involved, you can just simply equip a different weapon and he'll use it just as well as whichever party member usually has it. This changes the speed and hitbox of your overworld attacks, making some more practical than others for starting combat, which I should point out that the strength of random encounters in this game is very high. I think it's extremely important to start with an advantage to disallow the enemies going first in combat, or at least minimize the chances. Granted, it's not as life or death as a game like Metaphor ReFantasio, where all the enemies attack in a row, but still, 1 or 2 turns from the enemy are enough to put you in a bad spot, especially with Hama and Mudo skills being so prevalent. Considering how much you'll want Makoto to do on his turn, it's rare that you'll actively choose to do a regular attack, but if you're in an area where many random encounters are weak to a certain kind of physical attack, being able to do it for free is a perfect way to rack up extra damage without using HP or SP. Makoto takes on all the good and bad traits of whatever weapon he picks, so heavy weapons like axes tend to offer the biggest numbers, but now you run the risk of whiffing attacks and downing yourself. Many weapons offer a passive of some kind, including a stat-up, a status resist, or increased evasion against a specific element. Even if the damage numbers aren't important, then the type of damage dealt is useful, and when it isn't, then you can have a passive that boosts you. It's an incredible way of adding variety to your main character that also showcases how extraordinary he is compared to the rest of C's. Persona 3 was the first title to not make you deploy your entire team at once. In Personas 1 and 2, there are more than 5 party members, but you can only ever have 5 at a given moment, with no reserves and no options to leave characters out of a fight. Additionally, Personas acted like equipment, dictating your skills and relationship with damage types. Now that skills slowly change across level ups and type affinities are static, the way to adapt your strengths and weaknesses is by using different party members. Which, it's pretty normal, but a first for Persona. In Personas 1 and 2, hitting a weakness simply dealt extra damage, but following SMT Nocturne's foundation, P3 decided to give more of an incentive to hit weaknesses, providing an extra turn. In Nocturne and many other SMT titles post-2003, combat lives and dies by the press turn system. This video isn't about that, but Nocturne really did a lot to establish what SMT and Persona would be for the next 20 years and beyond. Basically, you have 1 turn icon per party member. Most attacks use up an icon and go down the list to the next guy. Hitting a weakness takes up half a turn, allowing for more actions to be performed during your side's turns. In SMT, one side goes until they're out of turn icons, then the other does the same. The other important difference I want to mention is losing turn icons. When an attack misses, you lose 2 turn icons instead of 1, and hitting an immunity of the enemy automatically ends your turn. There's more I could say about Nocturne's combat system, but that's the info that's important for today. Persona 3 doesn't use press turns, but uses the one more system to reward exploiting weaknesses. So from Persona 3 Portable onward, when an enemy is knocked down, they have decreased defenses and grant the character who achieved that effect 1 more turn. Aside from hitting weaknesses, this can also happen from critical hits. A knockdown enemy can't grant another turn until it gets back up, but if a character can get more unique enemies down, then they get more turns. Hitting an immunity an enemy has does not provide adverse consequences outside of wasting a character's turn. This means that unlike Nocturne, you don't need to be as careful if one enemy is immune to an element that the rest of the enemies are either weak or neutral to, allowing for easier crowd thinning without throwing away your turns. Now let's get back to what it means to be knocked down. I already explained it, but the way the condition works in P3 Fez is different. It still provides the defense drop and leads to an all-out attack, but it also has a core feature that never returned. A knocked down character had to use their whole turn to get up. So if Yukari is knocked down by electricity, then she'll use her whole turn to stand back up, curing the condition but disallowing her from helping with HP recovery or exploiting wind weaknesses. This also applies to enemies, so a downed enemy couldn't attack either. Because of how strong that effect is, there are additional ways to recover from being downed. Player exclusive one is the skill Repatra. This not so awesome skill allowed one party member to pick up another. It's exclusive to Junpei and a few personas the protagonist can get early on. To exchange a turn for a turn isn't the best thing ever, but it has its uses, especially going back to that example with Yukari. Sometimes you need to heal more than you need to attack. The other way to recover from being downed is to take damage. This method feels strange coming from newer titles, but I think it fits the flow of the game well. Considering how detrimental it is to be downed, it makes sense that taking a hit when your defenses are lowered would take away the condition and give you back your turn. As before, this applies to enemies. Now what's truly incredible to me, and the reason why I love the combat system from the OG P3 so much, is because it creates a situation that rarely exists in future titles. An all-out attack is not always the best move to make. Think about it. You have the choice between dealing a high amount of damage or healing and buffing to deny the enemy its turn. This is usually a choice you'll see in random encounters more than bosses, since quite a few bosses in Tartarus don't have an elemental weakness, especially if they're a solo encounter. Single enemies with the weakness to exploit become possible to loop because you can hold them hostage by always making sure they have to get up on their turn and then knock them down again. Bosses without a weakness can still be crit, leading to unexpected knockdowns and a chance to either all-out attack or recover. You may be wondering how feasible this all is if your whole party is controlled by CPUs, and the answer is easier than you think.
Pick it up. Pick it up.
Adding to the pile of its unique traits, P3 Fez's tactics menu has unique options. Since it's the only method of control compared to P4 and P5, it's more developed because it really is your only choice for getting through combat. These tactics are also your only way to influence your party members outside of your own turn. They all default to act freely, which vaguely trends towards attacking and sometimes throwing in heals for low health allies. But most tactics have specific purposes made clear by the name of the tactic, like knockdown, standby, and assign target. These, plus all-in options like full assault and heal/support, grant the player a surprising amount of flexibility in affecting what happens outside of their singular turn. People always clown on Mitsuru using Marin Karen, but I promise that's not a common sight if you're engaging with the tactics menu as often as the game expects you to. I'm sorry to say, but you don't want to pick tactics on turn 1 and let it rock until you win or die. You'll have to consider your team's position and how things could change before you can direct your team again. You need to plan for what's happening now and update your team on what to do next during most rounds of combat. You know, like a leader. Your act freely Mitsuru and Akihiko aren't gonna carry you, they need direction too. Your allies won't intentionally use moves that won't have an effect. They're willing to try elements that they don't know the outcome of, but like once Akihiko realizes a boss nulls electric moves, then he's not going to use them anymore. You also get to analyze regular enemies fully for free. You can ask Mitsuru or Fuka to do that and they'll provide the full type chart in about a turn. And that info is now known to your party members as well. It doesn't work on bosses, but again, once they see a bad effect, they'll avoid it. If you're facing down 4 enemies, then including your own allies, you directly choose what happens 1 out of 8 turns. To keep tensions high, battles fair, and the player engaged, combat features a button that shows the exact turn order of everybody. The game plainly labels every entity with a number denoting when that character moves, allowing the player to choose tactics that fit the order of events and make their own move in accordance to that plan. So in the first forced encounter in Tartarus with the Venus Eagles, they're weak to pierce. You can equip yourself with a bow, and with Yukari you can easily down the birds over and over again. With Junpei you could either make him pass, or assign him to attack an eagle that isn't down so you don't give the enemies more turns. An interesting balance and a nice first test of the game's mechanics. As a whole, it's very possible to set up each team member to effectively maintain buffs, debuffs, heals, knockdowns, crowd control, or target a problem enemy. All the while, you can use Makoto to either cover a hole your current squad isn't great at handling, or ensure a certain action is taken, like if you're paranoid about getting healed enough and you don't trust Ken to do it. The protagonist is usually the main source of damage, but there's a reason you can build personas to do anything. Lastly, I wanted to talk about elements of gameplay that aren't fully tied to combat. The first thing is the strange split-up mechanic. This weird idea allowed your party members to explore a floor without you. When doing this, they'll initiate fights with shadows on their own, with the game running them in the background. You can see an ally's HP dwindle down until they win or lose, and apparently the XP they gain is increased, since XP is always divided by the number of party members in that encounter. I don't know if the system is running an actual battle simulation or is quickly comparing stats and equipment, but the feature is a weird inclusion, and for me personally, felt too risky to use, so I avoided it. The benefit is allies would pick up items they find and would tell you if they found the stairs or a return point, which you could use on the spot without getting there yourself, which is pretty nice. If you get into combat while alone, you can ask Fuka to call your allies to you, which can take a number of turns. I've never checked if there's a correlation between physical distance and turns until they show up, but it does make for an intense standoff while you try to wait for help or escape. If a party member is KO'd, they'll lay on the ground after the battle until you use a revival item on them. They can be abandoned on that floor, but they'll return to the bottom, become tired, and then they'll leave. Also, in the menu you can use to split your team up, you can ask Fuka to change the music. This Fez exclusive lets you pick from one of 4 remixes from Persona 1 and Persona 2. I don't know why these songs in particular, and if Fuka diegetically knows these songs, but the remixes are good. I do wish we got that one rearrangement of Every Day from the special soundtrack of Eternal Punishment. Alas, the song wouldn't exist for another 5 years. Such a shame. Another fun feature is what you do to change anybody's equipment. Unlike most games, Fez tries to highlight that your team is composed of unique people that you aren't in control of. To alter the equipment of anybody who isn't you, you have to talk to them. It can be at the base of Tartarus, or it can even be in the middle of exploring. As long as you aren't in combat, just go up and ask them, and you can equip that brand new weapon you just found. The cast doesn't go so far as to deny any of your picks, but the decision from Atlas to have you talk to an ally sticks out to me as a very conscious choice. It's way more inconvenient and less intuitive than going into a singular menu to make all the changes you want, but it plays into Fez's desire to humanize the party both as elements of the story and holistically from a gameplay perspective, so I like it. As I've gone into, you can't choose your allies' moves, only guide them. You can't change somebody's gear without talking to them. You can't even force somebody to go to Tartarus. I can hardly believe this hasn't come back, but the other characters have schedules and they're not the same as yours. Sometimes people will be unavailable to go to Tartarus at all. The given reason typically relates to school, with characters studying for a test or otherwise being caught up in an obligation they have to prioritize. Mitsuru, and eventually Fuka, at least have the decency to warn you when someone won't be available and why, but that's typically only on the day of. You could have planned to go to Tartarus, only to be suddenly informed that a party member you care about won't be there and have to either find something else to do or navigate Tartarus without them. Mitsuru and Akihiko make it apparent that you can't go there without one of them present, so on the rare occasion that both are occupied, you're wholly locked out of dungeon crawling for the night. Okay, so being real, I get why Atlas scrapped this mechanic, but it was so unintrusive that I want it back. It's cool and realistic to see my friends are up to things that don't involve me, and I either have to wait or make the plan without them. It's a small detail that, despite being a negative on the gameplay, makes the world and the people in it feel more real, as they have the chance to tell me no. The game also features a condition mechanic that comes into play when doing long stretches in Tartarus. In everybody's stat screen, you can see their condition, showing how they're holding up. Most of the time, everybody will be normal, shown with a little smiling face on their status screen. However, after doing many fights, characters will start to become tired, one by one. The tired condition drops their accuracy and defenses. It also gives allies a chance to ask to leave in the middle of a fight, which you can deny. At least they ask, unlike when they're afraid, where they can run away from the fight on their own turn and then put you at a sudden disadvantage. There's also Sick, which is like Tired, but worse. It carries all the same effects, but also drops a character's attack and makes their spells less impactful. Apparently it takes around a week of not going to Tartarus for this to be cured. I personally never experienced Sick party members, since that's hard to attain. A sick protagonist, though, is very possible. You can easily get this on accident by staying up late and studying too many times in a row. The protagonist, though, has ways to mitigate how tired he is, like using the bathroom, consciously choosing to go to bed early, or sleeping through class. Lastly, there's also the Great Condition. This one unfortunately doesn't come up too much for your party members, since they can only get it on scripted days, mostly the first time you use that character. Makoto, though, can get the great status by taking certain actions during the day, like sleeping early or using the bathroom while feeling good. A character that's great will have higher accuracy and score critical hits more frequently. It has to progress from great to good to tired, so they'll be usable for longer than usual. When a tired ally makes it back to the first floor of Tartarus, they leave for the night, and you can't argue about it. Early on in the game, this means you won't be able to fight with a full team, and everybody gets tired pretty quickly. It's a good way of showing that you aren't used to fighting shadows and what the Dark Hour does to the body. It also makes one-shotting sections of Tartarus extremely difficult at first, which I think is great. You can only go to Tartarus at night, which locks you out of raising your social stats and 2 social links, but it's still important, as there are so many social links available during the day, and raising social stats instead isn't usually a great use of time, especially as you get further into the game. Persona 4 and 5 push dungeon exploration to the daytime, which flows better with the game design and more balanced division of social links and activities. Well, more so in P5, but still. It also makes dungeon crawling more costly, which I think balances out the newer games, making it so much easier to clear a dungeon in a day or two. Everybody becomes more resilient to the Dark Hour and can be used for much longer without being tired. You also gain more party members, meaning even when someone's tired, you can sub them out with somebody else. And the absolutely crazy, insane balance to party members becoming tired and essentially unusable is how this game handles healing. You can, of course, heal with spells and items, but whenever you return to the first floor, your entire active party recovers all HP and SP, and there isn't a limit on this. I don't recall if the game actually tells you this, but it sure did take me a while to realize this when I played, and from there on, I abused this a lot. Anytime you get to a checkpoint floor, you should probably head down and save anyway because of how volatile combat is. It does of course mean you'll start cycling party members once they get tired, and that's the balance. This is why healing becomes a paid service in future titles, since the fatigue system was removed. It's another one of those elements that I understand why the series moved away from, but I enjoyed its implementation and how the system accommodated it. Persona 3 Fez is my favorite game of all time, and all those little idiosyncrasies to its gameplay that are unique in its own series really appeal to me specifically. You don't have to deal with them all now that Reload exists, and you know what, that's a good way to experience P3 as well, but for me, the way Fez delivers its message through gameplay mechanics, inconveniences, and relying on a team that doesn't always get along means more. And even though the sequels use a very similar combat system, if I want to play a game like Fez, then my only option is Fez. Also, the color palette is way better. If you've bounced off Fez before, or if you've never tried it for one reason or another, I encourage you to give it a chance. Don't be scared of Fez's CPU-controlled party members. Take the time to genuinely engage with the mechanics, and you'll find it works better than you think. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.